excuse me. In this video, we're going to look at how we can use piecewise functions. So how can we get certain bits of information from a piecewise function? So let's get to it. We're going to use the following piecewise function and graph to answer the follow-up questions. So a piecewise function is going to break up some of our equations into pieces, hence the name piecewise, and all these pieces together, so we got a piece here, flat piece, and then part of a quadratic piece there. All these pieces together, they create a function, okay? So this piece is restricted to only x values less than or equal to -1. This piece of the function is only restricted from -1 to +1 for x values, and this piece is restricted from, it's an x squared piece, is restricted for x values greater than or equal to 1. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what a piecewise function in class, so I don't want to go too crazy into them. Let's just get to the evaluating piece. So we have this equation, we have our graph, and I'm going to talk about how we could use both of them to get pieces of information that we need. So we need to figure out f of 2. So my equation originally starts at f of x, okay, f of x. So what's happening here is that x piece is being replaced by 2. So in short, they're kind of communicating here, hey, what's happening in this function when x is 2? What's happening in this equation, this function, when x is 2? So we're going to look at how can we do that using the equation, and how can we use the graph to answer that question. So if we know and we have the knowledge that x is equal to 2, let's take a look at our restrictions here and figure out which piece should I be using. So if x is 2 less than or equal to -1? No, so we should not use this piece. Is 2 greater than -1 but also less than 1? No, so we shouldn't use that piece. Is 2 greater than or equal to 1? Yes, okay. So my x value of 2 fits with this inequality, so we need to use this piece of the function. So what you would do algebraically is plug a 2 in for the x in this equation. So if you plug in a 2, you would have a 2 in for the x, and we still need a square. 2 squared is 4. That's how you can use this equation to evaluate f of 2. It's 4. Here's how you can use the graph. Okay, they're telling you x is 2, so let's look on our x-axis. Let's go all the way over to +2. Hi, there we are. And then let's go find our function. So my function's up above, and when x is 2, we're at this point on our function. So we went the x first, we found our graph. What we need to find is the y value for this point. So slide on over to the y-axis. That is a y value of, oh my goodness, 4. Okay, 4. We got the same thing there. So that's how you could use the equation. You're going to go through the inequalities first, figure out your piece, use the equation, or you could use the graph. So whichever comes easier to you, you could do that. Next one, f of 3. I'm going to go through both forms here, f of 3, so a little bit faster. They are telling us, hey, x is 3. So if I go through my inequalities, 3 is not less than or equal to -1, so do not use the first piece. -1 is less than x, which is less than 1. 3 does not fit there. 3 is greater than or equal to 1, so we're going to use this piece. So if I plug in a 3, we're going to have 3 squared. We end up with 9. So I plugged in a 3 for the bottom piece. Square it, you get 9. If we wanted to do this graphically, we would go all the way over to x is 3, and we would go up and try and find our graph. But the issue is our graph, although it does continue on, we don't know exactly where it's hitting there. So the graph on this particular one is not helpful. That's why it's good to know how to use the equation or how to use the graph. Next one, f of -1, f of -1. So if I look at my equations, is -1 less than or equal to -1? Yes, because we have that line underneath, that means, hey, these can also be equal to. So if I'm imagining a -1 here, -1 is equal to -1. Therefore, this is the piece I am using. So if I plug a -1 into that equation, we would end up with -1 plus 2, which that does simplify to a positive 1. That's neat. If I wanted to do that graphically, go over to an x of negative 1, find my graph, which we are right here. The y value of that point is positive 1, which, hey, that's what we got. Finally, f of negative 8. So talking about x value of negative 8. Using the equations, we'll check it out. Negative 8 is less than or equal to negative 1, so I need to plug in a negative 8 here. So I plug in a negative 8 plus 2. So I'm following the inequalities. Negative 8 is less than or equal to negative 1, so we're using this guy. Plug in a negative 8. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. If I wanted to do that graphically, negative 8 is off my graph, so graphing route is not really useful to us here. So all we have to do is use the equation. Two more questions for us. What I want to do is I want to find the values of x for which f of x equals 4. So kind of switch the game. Earlier we had f of like 2 and we found what it ended up being, or f of 3 and we found out, hey, this is equal to 9. We're kind of working backwards. We're getting the answer. We're trying to find really the question. So it's almost like Jeopardy. We have the answer. We're going to find the question. So we don't know what x is, but we do know the y value it produces is 4. We don't know what x is, but we knew the y value it produces is 4. So if you take a look at this graphically, I think graphically is really an easy way to go with this because sometimes these equations could get quite complex. When we're doing graphically the first half of this video, we went x, found the video, found my y. Let's work backwards since we are going backwards here. We're starting with our answer and we need to find the question. So let's start with the answer of y equals 4 and find our x. So when y equals 4, we are up here. So we start with the y instead. Find my graph. So if we look left, there's no graph over there. If we look right, there is my graph. Then find the x value associated with that. And lo and behold, it is 2. Okay, it is 2. So the x value that is going to produce f of x being 4 is 2 there. Okay, let's see that one more time. Different example. F of x equals negative 2. So we don't know the x value, but we do know the y value is negative 2. The y value is negative 2. So let's go to our graph and figure out, hey, where is the y of negative 2? We're down here. Let's go find my graph. So we're looking left and right. So we started with the y, find our graph, find the x. So there's our y of negative 2. Our graph is over here. We just need to find the x value associated with this, which is negative 4. Negative 4. So my x value is negative 4. And that, my friends, is some basics on how to use piecewise function, either evaluating or working a little bit backwards, and how to do that either if you're provided just the equation or just the graph.